So I think, well, first of all, thank you, Tim, and the ITASA team. I was also in the ITASA conference organizer many years ago. So I know it's very hard to get people to come to the Friday morning session. And so thank you guys for all being here. And I think the way we're going to try to do this is I'm going to be, I guess, a little bit of moderator, facilitator, and then ask a few questions, and then let the people who know what they're talking about actually talk. And then maybe at the end we can take some questions from the audience, and then at the very end I'll do a little bit of a summary.
And we have until 11 a.m. Is that right?
Okay.
So about 25.
Yeah, that's more than enough time. No, not really, but we'll make it work. So the first, the sort of first question, of course, is kind of what everybody has been focused on, which is this past election in Taiwan that happened in January. For those of you who haven't been following this stuff, like it's March Madness. So there was a big political turnover in Taiwan. The ruling party, the KMT, lost both the presidency and the legislature majority. And so, of course, within aside from that story, there's also a story of there were many these so-called third parties or third force parties, each trying to forge a different kind of politics, rather than your traditional KMT, DPP, pro-China, pro-independence, etc. So I guess that the question is sort of, okay, now that the election is behind us, what's next? And the question I wanted to ask is, there's sort of maybe three subtopics, right? The first subtopic is, what's going to happen to progressive or liberal forces in Taiwan? I know, so for example, so your party was very much okay, let's push for social democracy. There was also the New Power Party, which had a lot of participants from the Sunfa movement. And then the DPP is supposed to be, the word progressive is in their name, right? But, so that's one thing. The other thing is, I guess the question is, how do people like us, in the United States, what role can we play, or like why should we pay attention? I guess that's the question. Since we only have two of you, so yeah, we'll just anybody can start talking.
Yeah, you thought. Rest your voice for a little bit. Well, first off, I should just say that was a wonderful presentation. I learned a lot from it, and I'm really pleased that we were able to bring this particular event. You're the perfect person for this. In terms of the kind of progressive agenda in Taiwan, progressive meaning kind of in the social democratic sense, the name of the party here. In Europe, often focuses on environmental protection, distribution of wealth, and pro-labor policies, and all of these things have actually not been central to electoral politics in Taiwan, really since the beginning of democratization. And that's certainly not for lack of trying. Lots of people have attempted to found, say, a labor party, an environmental party, and run a credible campaign for office, and most of those parties have gone nowhere. And so one of my questions going into this election was whether that would actually change, and it was a real kind of test of whether we're going to move beyond kind of blue-green politics in Taiwan and have a really significant third force. And my own view is that we're still kind of in a blue-green world post-2016 elections. There's certainly more votes than ever have gone to non-blue-green parties. But in terms of actual representation within the legislature, we've got 3 of the 4 parties that were there before. They're back in. You can line them up on the blue-green spectrum very easily. KMT, PLP, and DPP. And then the one that is new, the New Power Party, is really kind of slotted in right in place of Thailand. They're kind of like the younger generation's version of Thailand in some sense. And so, at least on this blue-green spectrum, the new legislature doesn't look much different from the old legislature. It's just a different distribution of seats on the blue-green spectrum. And so, my take on the results of this election is that if you want to advance a progressive agenda in Taiwan, and certainly it doesn't hurt to keep trying to advance it through a third party, third force, but at least for the next 4 years, that advancement is going to have to take place probably within the ruling DPP, and to some extent, perhaps, through the New Power Party. So I actually, in some ways, this is a real significant realigning election. It's the first time the DPP has ever won a majority. But in terms of changing the fundamental issues on which Taiwan elections, on which the results turn, I don't really see a major shift in this election. Certainly not to the extent that some people expected before this election. Should I take the U.S. role now? Sure. What can people in the U.S., friends of Taiwan in the U.S., do to support Taiwan and Taiwan's democracy in particular? I've thought about this a lot because I'm in a role where that's my job. I actually, I think rather than open advocacy for particular political parties in Taiwan, I think there's a longer game that needs to be played here in the United States, and that is taking Taiwan on its own merits and studying it for its own merits. Democracy, in many ways, I sit in an institution at a center called the Center on Democracy Development and the Rule of Law, and so I'm naturally around lots of people studying democracy around the world and the problems that come with democracy. And Taiwanese are often very pessimistic about the future of their democracy. And then I go into our weekly seminar and I hear about places like Egypt or Lebanon or Turkey or Russia. They're and the United States. We actually have a program now dedicated to studying the United States democracy and all the problems with it, because there's kind of a building concern in this building that the United States democracy is at a kind of danger point here. And so many of the same things that we worry about in Taiwan are actually equally as bad or worse in a lot of the rest of the world's democracies. And so rather than thinking of Taiwan as this kind of unique case in the world, I really prefer to think of it as one of many third-wave democracies that's meeting a bunch of challenges and in many ways is dealing with those challenges as well as any democracy from that group is. And so my own perspective on this is that we really need to support Taiwan studies in the United States and focus on Taiwan as a case that's worth studying in its own right, not as kind of a week on the syllabus in a Chinese studies class or a week on the syllabus as a study of kind of East Asian regional security through a kind of U.S. prism, but rather as a third-wave democracy. The last thing I'll say about this is that there's been I would say, a worrying decline in Taiwan studies in the United States. Both of us are going to the Association of Asian Studies meeting in Seattle later today, in fact. There are actually very few Taiwan panels at the Association of Asian Studies. Taiwan is almost invisible in Asian studies, and part of that is that the reasons people get interested in Taiwan in the United States and the English-speaking world are often because of cross-strait relations, because of an initial interest in China, and then they find out, oh, there's this Taiwan thing here, and I want to learn more about it. And so Taiwan often gets lumped into the Chinese studies part of Asian studies. And I think that's doing a disservice to Taiwan. I think people who study Taiwan from that perspective get a very partial view. And so, if I were a dictator and I had, $1 million or something, 10 million maybe, I would push for kind of strengthening the role of Taiwan studies and outreach to people who actually have a connection to Taiwan and promoting it within the academy. Taiwan actually had a very strong presence in the academy in the 1990s. There's a lot of interest in Taiwan's transition to democracy. So if you read material on Taiwan, much of the best work was actually produced in the 1990s. And since then, it's with some prominent exceptions, but the general trend has been down. There's been less work on Taiwan, less interest. So we in this program are trying to push against that and counterbalance that. So your support would be appreciated. And I'll turn it over to you.